Hey guys, what's up? What's going on? I'm Mike, and you're listening to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up? The bi-monthly movie review podcast. And I am joined in this week's intro by Joe.
Hey guys.
And both of us are here because we need to talk about us.
And not just the movie Us, but literally Us, the podcast. We'll get right into our review of the movie Us right after this. But as some of you may have guessed based on us scaling back on the episode frequency, this will be our final season of How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up? The podcast.
What your mother is trying to say is that we're getting divorced, but it's not your fault.
You know what? It's not you. It's us, the movie. Seriously though, you guys have been such an incredibly supportive audience and really great fans, and we are forever in debt to you're just listening to us every week. It means a lot.
Putting up with us every week.
Yeah.
The reality of it is just that we started this podcast at a very different time in our lives. It was 2015. Trump wasn't president yet. Really, this is all Donald J. Trump's fault. No, I mean, just we were both working at different jobs at the time. I think we were both kind of hopping, unfortunately, in and out of unemployment
Right.
at the time. It was fortunate for the podcast because it meant we had a lot of time on our hands. And we're able to sort of build this up into what it is today. But unfortunately, circumstances have changed. Unfortunate for the podcast, fortunate for us, I guess. You know, we've both kind of got jobs that don't allow us to devote as much time as we used to the podcast.
Right.
It just kind of becomes like a logistic thing at a certain point.
Most definitely. A podcast is more than just sitting down and, recording. I mean, in our case, it's going out and watching these movies, and it's a lot of kind of post-production, and it's a lot of, taking notes and doing research and everything.
Booking guests and buying beer and...
Oh, yes. Financially.
Yes.
And that's not to say that we don't love doing it, but we also feel that the podcast has kind of run its course artistically as well. I mean, we'll get into it with on the Dumbo episode, which is 2 weeks from now. But it's just kind of like, I don't know, if you look at the 2019 lineup of movies, there's nothing really that we haven't seen already that we haven't already voiced our opinions on. It seems like a appropriate time to end, or have a last season. And
Yeah, I mean, we've been going for a while. I mean, that Dumbo review that you're talking about that we recorded tonight, that'll be out in 2 weeks. That's episode 175.
Right.
175 episodes. That's a lot of movies, a lot of episodes, a lot of reviews. And I think we kind of just want to, hang it up before we start to get repetitive as the movies start to get repetitive as well. Everything's a franchise, everything's a sequel. I think it like really started to hit home early in this season when we did like 4 superhero movies in a row.
Right.
And it was just kind of like, my God, like
yeah,
it's a bit much.
Yeah. And I don't know.
I think we also want to focus on other things artistically, personally. Like I know when Joe and I sort of had this conversation about, what's the future of the podcast? When does it end? And we sort of came to this decision of bringing it to an end. One of the big points was just that, like, God, it would be nice to get back into making movies again.
Right.
Rather than just reviewing movies and being forced to see some of the movies that we don't necessarily want to see all the time. And,
right.
Yeah. So that will be great. But yeah, and the podcast has obviously been great and awesome, but it can also be limiting due to the amount of just time that it requires. So it would be nice to dip our toes back into other things artistically.
Right. Work on our own work as opposed to, just reviewing other people's work.
Throwing stones at other people's work.
Right. That can become taxing after a while. Yeah.
Now that we've trashed everybody else's movies.
It's time to make our own.
Who wants to make a movie with us? Yeah, so that's basically the why of this happening. I guess the how of it, the logistics of it is just that it'll be business as usual for the next couple of months. We're going to be reviewing the biggest movies every other week. We're definitely going to try to bring back a lot of our favorite guests, some of your guys' favorite guests. We're talking about the possibility of like some unique combinations of guests since there's limited space in the amount of episodes that we have left. But we're planning to make our final episode August 1st, 2019. Right. We'll kind of keep it under wraps for now, but it's going to be something special. We're going to have a lot of friends of the pod coming on for their final appearance. So I think it'll be fun. It'll be more of a celebration of the podcast. So definitely stay tuned for that. And until then, thank you guys so much for listening and supporting us over these years. Yeah. Hope you continue to listen over these next couple of months. Yeah, and got the rest of the summer. Yeah, and to enjoy the pod. And that's what I was gonna say. That was something that we discussed when we discussed before this. Is that, you know, if we're gonna end this podcast, we're going to end it right. We're not going to waste your guys' time. We're certainly not going to waste our time. I should have said that reversed. We're certainly not going to waste your guys' time. More importantly, we're not going to waste our time. But yeah, I think, as our final season, I think we want to go out with a bang. And I think there's going to be some very interesting episodes coming out, including the very last one, which, again, will involve a lot of guests and a lot of alcohol. So it's something to look forward to. In tune with the way this podcast has always been. Right. So just some other sort of housekeeping stuff. We've obviously got a lot of merch left, and now there's a clearance sale that's going to be going on. Everything must go. So if you've ever wanted to cop some How Many Fingers merch, you can check it out. We're going to have some ridiculously low prices on there just to kind of clear house. We've got t-shirts, we got koozies, we got stickers. We got it all. So check it out for even lower prices than it was before, which were very low. Yeah, they were already very low. And as far as the future of listening to the podcast, if you've got like a favorite episode that you'd like to listen to again, our episodes have always been free to download. Now's a good time to download them. And you can keep that audio file forever and do whatever you want with it. Right. So I'm sure we'll be on YouTube forever. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is that we'll be on YouTube for as long as YouTube's in business. We've got all our episodes up there now. It's free to host them there, so we'll keep them there. But from some of the other podcasting platforms, we're all hosted through SoundCloud, and at some point, we're not going to pay to keep those up there since we can keep them on other sites for free. So you might not be able to listen on other platforms, but YouTube will be available, and you can download literally every episode you want now and keep it forever. So I'm sure if you want to leave your own mark on the podcast legacy, I'm sure we'll open up something for our final episode where users can also submit, you know, if you guys want to write kind words, mean words. Mean words. We've gotten plenty of those over the years as well. Yeah. And I think we'll keep the Facebook group around as well, because that's been a lot of fun. Just, I mean, it's not like we're giving up on movies or anything. We're still just as invested in them. It's just not going to be in a recorded format after that. So we'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the Facebook group, talk about all the movies coming out and sharing memes and just business as usual there, because it's been a lot of fun. Right. The community that we've tried to start over there. Exactly. And I mean, even outside of that community, we'd love to bring some of you guys in, from all social media platforms. Anybody that we've talked to or anybody that has commented or anything, we'd love to keep in contact with you. So definitely join up on the community if you don't want to lose these two precious voices. Yes, please. And yeah, I mean, it kind of goes without saying that there's going to be more stuff from us. It just, after this podcast is over, it won't be this podcast, but movies, music, we're very artistic people. We're going to keep creating. And that's kind of the whole point of this, is to move on to something else and create something else. Keep you guys in the loop. And then you guys can rate us in fingers. Based on the shit we create. But yeah, that's about it. Yeah. I think our whole main point is just that we want this to be a celebration. It's not, it's bittersweet, but it's not a sad thing for us. I think we feel like we've done what we set out to do with this podcast. We had a lot of fun. We drank some beers and we reviewed some movies for 3+ years. I think 4+ years now. Right. And you guys deserve something better than us just
stop recording. You know, like if we wanted to end it, we could just be like, all right, and that was the last episode. Instead, I think we kind of want to go out with a bang here. So you have that to look forward to.
So, we've got Dumbo next week, or 2 weeks from now, but this week we're reviewing Us. The movie by Jordan Peele. So thanks so much for listening to this intro, and thanks for continuing to listen to this episode.
Yeah, definitely.
Enjoy. Welcome to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up? Featuring two guys getting flapjacked and reviewing movies in a weekly podcast form.
And Michael Muesli left that drunk synonym for us on Facebook.
Thank you, Michael.
And if you guys want to leave one for us, you can hit us up on any of our platforms. I think we're fresh out after this batch. So by all means, leave us some.
The barrel hath run dry. So please help us fill that back up. Get some synonyms in there. But Joe, what are we drinking this week?
It is Rona season.
We have been really into... I feel like guilty even like plugging it because it's just bad. But there's this account on Instagram called Steve Will Do It. And it's just this dude who just will do it. It's just a lot of like really ridiculous drinking videos. And one of the things that he's all about is just chugging Ronas.
Yeah.
Rona season.
Rona season SZN.
Yeah. Tis the season.
Yes. But we've already done Corona Extra, which is just regular Corona, and then Corona Light. And we were really in the mood for Coronas because it's Rona season.
It's always Rona season.
It's starting to get nice out. It's Rona season. And Mike, you stumbled upon this Corona premiere.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those. It's just Corona.
Did you know about this in advance before going to the store? Was this a...
I had my heart set on buying Corona. It just happened that I was able to find one. We hadn't had one before.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, I'll get a side beer of Corona if I can't find one that we haven't had before.
What a happy coincidence.
It's just Corona. It tastes exactly the same. It's one of those things where they must change like one tiny little thing about the formula, because I know with like the big breweries, they're all about like just actual real estate in the liquor store. They want to take up as much space as they basically want an entire door of the fridge to be all Bud Light or all, Corona or whatever.
So you gotta have like all the different numbers of cans and shapes.
You can't just have Corona Lights. You gotta have Corona Rita or Corona
Rita.
Is that what they're called?
Corona Ritas. Yeah.
Corona Ritas?
I think so. No, or is that like a margarita with a... Oh,
that's what that is.
Coronita.
Coronitas. Yeah, the little guys.
Yeah.
We always make the mistake of being like, oh, I brought a 6-pack of Coronas. Oh, they're half the size.
Man, Coronas are cheap here. And then, oh no, they're like...
Oh, they're Polly Pocket Corona.
Tiny, yeah. You put one in your kid's lunchbox. This isn't for me, you grown man. Yeah, I think it's like slightly less alcohol content, like
it's probably a little more
by the decimal, and then and I can imagine it's like lower cal. I think maybe
it's 90 calories, 90 cal.
Could mean a different thing. 90 caliber.
It's a hell of a Corona. But it is hitting the spot. The weather's like starting to warm up today. It was like 65 degrees. It's Rona season.
Rona season, baby. Just isolating our entire listeners.
Okay, we get it. We haven't watched his videos.
Yeah, it is not for the faint of heart either. No. The Steve Will Do It, because he does it. You know, he just...
It's not even just always drinking stuff. Sometimes it's like, oh, let me chug like this bottle of mustard. Or
Let me like pound 4 like large cans of dog food.
he's like a guy doing dares that nobody is daring him to do. He's like, I'll do it.
And somehow it has just morphed into a career for him. So
He's got a whole line of merch, and he sells like beer pong tables now.
Oh, yeah.
And beer bongs, or is that what they're called?
beer bongs, yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. It sounds like the wrong thing to say, but that's what
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
T-shirts that say Rona season. But yeah, this week we're reviewing Us.
We're talking about Us.
Let's talk about Us, Mike. You want to give me that IMDb description?
I do. A family's serene beach vacation turns to chaos when their doppelgangers appear and begin to terrorize them.
That it is.
They have the like umlau thing over the A in doppelgangers. That makes me think it should be said differently. Doppelgangers.
Yeah, I just assume it's gangers.
It's one of those words that's like so used in American English that you don't really think to like put any of the actual German punctuation on it.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's weird. But yeah, it's Us. Y'all know what it is. That's all I have written in my Joe notes. Y'all know what this is. Yeah, I mean, again, if you want a more extensive background on Jordan Peele's career, you can always go to our Get Out episode. That was a great episode.
With Sean Henry.
Yeah. But this is his sophomore film for Jordan Peele. It's obviously kind of the same deal where it's a Blumhouse production produced by Jason Blum.
Does Blumhouse just only give $20 million to any movie? Like, I feel like every Blumhouse movie is just like $20 million is the max they're willing to give out.
Yeah, I think that is the max. Their go-to amount, I think, is closer just to $5 million.
Yeah.
Like all their, yeah. But yeah, no, that does seem like when somebody's successful, Blumhouse is just gonna like,
here's 20.
we'll bump you up to 20. Yeah. Which is still,
Here's a 20, kid.
which is, yeah, still nothing in the grand scheme of things. This film does look great for 20 million. I feel like it's really well distributed. But it's starring Lupita Nyong'o, Winston Duke, Elizabeth Moss, Tim Heidecker, a bunch of other great people. Michael Abels, is that how you say Abels?
Yeah.
He did the score again. I know he did that for Get Out. It's kind of similar, pretty different. But yeah, I mean, let's just, this is all shit. Y'all already know what it is. I mean, just to kind of cover Get Out, I mean, just to check back in on Get Out, it had such, I don't even think we realized it during the episode. I was just listening to like a small part of it. I don't even think we kind of like totally realized like the cultural impact or cultural relevance or cultural phenomenon, however you want to put it, that Get Out had. I mean, there's like terms like the sunken place, like which was brought up in like important dialogues. This to me is an important dialogue, but like when Samuel L. Jackson called tweeted that Kanye was like in the sunken place after like he publicly supported Donald Trump. It just, everybody knew, like he didn't have to have like a subtweet that was like the sunken place is a reference to like Get Out. Like, no, it's in our lexicon. There's so many memes and everything. This film premiered at South by Southwest, as we've pretty exhaustively covered. A film fest could be a dangerous place to watch a movie. There's just a ton of hype in the room because, you're the first people in the world to watch it. Why wouldn't you be, excited and completely overblow the hype and everything for everybody else on Twitter and everything. Sorry, I feel like I cut you off at some point. You looked like you were going to say something.
No, keep going.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I mean, let's talk about Us.
It doesn't get old.
It doesn't.
It's the joke that keeps on giving.
You're going to hear a lot more of that here on the podcast.
'Tis the season.
But I feel like Us is more of a straight horror film than Get Out was. It's genre-wise, it feels like very like a home invasion movie. Just to like cover this movie broadly before we get into spoilers, just because there's a decent amount of spoiling to be done with this movie. The home invasion is just like one central part of the movie that, plays out for a pretty long time too. Even though a lot of home invasion horror movies are just that the entire film.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, when these trailers first came out for Us, I was never particularly like, ooh, and I came around with Get Out. I think if I were to review that now, and I haven't seen it, it's just, it's just improved in my mind, maybe, and maybe culturally it's improved. I'd have to like revisit it. But I feel like I'd have it more at like a 4.5 fingers, where I think I gave it originally like 4 fingers. But yeah, when the trailers for Us came out, I was kind of like, okay, like maybe we're just not seeing something in this trailer. Like there's something to be hidden or something. But I wasn't like totally on board. I wanted to see it because it was Jordan Peele, and I feel like we'll talk about that a lot because a lot of
I think I was on board for different reasons than I liked Get Out for it. Because like when the trailer for Get Out came out, I just remember being like, what is this about? Like I think there was a lot of mystique and mystery about Get Out. Yeah. And then you watch the movie and you're like, oh, it's like this really smart critique of our culture, and there's a lot like going on beneath the surface, and it still kind of works on the surface. I never thought Get Out was that scary. I know there's a lot of debate about that, where that's almost like a bad thing to say that you thought Get Out was a comedy. Right. But I still think that's true. I don't think you hire some of the actors that you hire in Get Out if you don't consider it to be a comedy yourself too. I kind of don't know why Jordan Peele has so like deluded himself about the impact of that movie. Oh,
do you remember it was because that whole debate was
with
brought
the Golden Globes?
Yeah, with the Golden Globes, and that it was up for
best comedy.
That's okay. I thought it was up for like best drama, and then yes.
He doesn't think it's funny. He think it's straight horror.
Mm-hmm. And then he made a tweet that was like, Get Out is a documentary or something. It was just like he was almost just being a meme of himself at that point. Like,
and then he did something similar about Us too, where he's like, Us is a horror film. Like,
yes,
but like, so going into this, I thought this actually does look scary. Like the trailer is pretty creepy. I thought there was like, what did I go to see? What was it? I think it was not Captain Marvel. Glass. When I went to see Glass, I had the theater to myself, and this trailer played beforehand, and like didn't have any like bodies like dampening the sound, so it was like really loud and booming, and it was like pretty creepy to watch just the trailer for that like by myself. I just thought the sort of underlying metaphor of what it might be about, because you can't watch Get Out and be like, oh, the next movie is just going to be whatever it is on the surface. Like clearly there's going to be something going on beneath the surface, and I didn't think that was as clear from the trailer. So I was like, all right, well, at least it'll be a good horror movie this time.
Right, yeah.
I also remember being a little bit disappointed because I just thought Get Out was such a good movie and not very scary that I was kind of like, just get out of horror. Like, right. You proved you're a good horror or a good filmmaker, and you used horror as a way to get in there. Like, I kind of just had a hard time buying that horror was really his like passion. It seems like it is now.
Yeah, now it seems like it is. But it did. Yeah, again, I would never like. I would never like discount anybody for kind of using horror as this like to get your foot in the door of being
very accessible.
Yes,
from both sides, as an audience member and as someone trying to get into filmmaking.
It's just kind of like, do you see John Krasinski just being like a horror director now?
No, yeah. I think he's doing A Quiet Place too. But apart from like a sequel, like if after that, if he does another horror movie, I'm going to be like, come on, John. Like,
what are you doing?
Although I think he did a movie before A Quiet Place.
I think just people are so... He did brief interviews with Hideous Men.
And then did he do that one about corn?
Ooh, yeah. Was that the Did he direct that? He might have.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think we talked about that in The Quiet Place, where it's like, no, it's not his first movie.
Right, yeah.
He's had a few swings at this.
But again, I if you make like a good horror movie, I feel like people really gas you up. Like, kind of like, I just remember reading ridiculous tweets again coming out of South by Southwest where people were like, is John Krasinski the next fucking horror genius mind of our generation? And it's kind of, even the trailers for us like really gas up Jordan Peele, where it's just kind of like, from the fucking horror mastermind that you know that already did Get Out, which fucked your mind. Like, it's like I really like to over exaggerate. I was listening to the Captain Marvel one episode that we just did, and there's just so many things I just exaggerate with such great, like, I don't know. You guys know it's a joke. Nobody's criticizing.
They didn't actually say that.
Yes, yeah. But yeah, I don't know. And then there's like also, I feel like Get Out and Us are, I mean, just to kind of dig a little more into that point of kind of like, well, gee, like, what's Us really about, kind of, because it's unclear from the trailer. And I think Get Out and Us seem like two very different movies. He doesn't really follow the same template. Whereas Get Out kind of left you thinking and talking about like important issues. Us kind of leaves you like thinking and talking about like understanding like the logic of the film, and kind of just what's been happening like this past week is just like an explosion of just articles about theories about Us, kind of, which is still good. There's any dialogue after a movie is still like a dialogue, and that's important. It's an important part of cinema, just to like talk about it. I just like hope that's what Jordan Peele wanted, is like not, it's the, like, it's very different from Get Out. It's
I'm not sure. I think we'll get into it. But
okay.
So I think like with Get Out, the conversation ended up being bigger than the film itself.
Yeah.
And then with this, the conversation seems to be purely about the film itself. And I'm not entirely sure that's what he wanted.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I also don't know if anyone ever sets out to make a movie thinking that it'll be bigger than the movie itself.
Right.
You know, like I don't know if that was even his intention with Get Out. Like, I have no idea what his intentions were, because I thought he was making a comedy.
Right. Yeah. And so, it's just kind of like, yeah. No, go on.
No, that was really, it's just, yeah.
Okay.
I have a hard time getting inside the mind of Jordan, the ridiculous mind of Jordan Peele.
It's, I don't know. I would never say they're like the same thing. Again, like, I think that's also why people liked Get Out. Like, it was exploring these kind of new, like, not just genre kind of, all horror films are a little funny, you know, but there was something where it kind of reminded me of like Scary Movie, but without like the parody and the ridiculousness. It was still like Scary Movie. Maybe it was because I was younger. Like, it had like a bunch of horror beats to it. Like, it was still kind of like, there were like even jump scares in Scary Movie and like that. Yeah. It just seemed like there's just like, there was like, there's nothing wrong with like calling Get Out like a comedy, or I don't know, clarifying the genre as a combination of horror and comedy. And I mean, Us definitely has a lot of similar comedic and horror beats to it.
I don't want to like harp on that conversation too much, but that was just one of those things that I was always like, I mean, like, you have like Lil Ray in there, like,
right,
delivering punchline after punchline after punchline. Like, it's clearly a comedy of a movie, right? In the same token that like a blockbuster like action movie could also be considered a comedy, and that's not really like an insult. Like, a lot of superhero movies are comedies more than they are drama.
Right. For some reason I thought I think when I like first watched the trailer, I wasn't totally paying attention, but for a while I thought Lil Ray was like he was the male actor instead of like Winston Duke in this. I like totally like just, and I was just kind of like, in my head it made sense. It was just kind of like, oh, you know, like, directors stick with actors that they liked, and like, you know, Lil Ray like kind of had his bit part in the last one, and he's kind of bumping him up to like the And like the entire time I was watching the movie, I was like, this would have been like pretty ridiculous if that was the case. And I really do like Winston Duke. I mean, I feel like we've only really seen him in like Marvel with
Black Panther.
Yeah, he's in Black Panther. And I like him in that. He's very I don't know, he gives like a great performance. In the long line of people who are better than Chadwick Boseman, who are more charismatic. I would have rather watched a movie about him than fucking Black Panther himself. But yeah, let's go back to Us. I mean, just overall thoughts before we get into the kind of spoiler section. I feel like this movie is, I mean, just to get back to like, is this what Jordan Peele wanted? And it's kind of like he leaves this film pretty like intentionally like opaque or like open-ended and like vague. And I don't like that, left me pretty like unsatisfied and confused. Not like, oh, this is confusing. Because I do like a lot of elements that are like, oh, you do the work yourself kind of in your head. Even though he does beat you over the head with a few things that I wasn't crazy about. But yeah, there's a lot of things where Jordan Peele seems like very uninterested in covering or just like getting coverage. And like, that makes me like worried. It's just kind of like, dude, what are you doing? Like, this isn't gonna, I don't know, work out. I just feel like we talked about this before we turned the mics on, but I feel like there was a lot of details, and I'll talk about this more as we get into spoilers. There's a lot of details that Jordan Peele left to like live in a layer of like abstraction and like the unexplained, and like it was obvious that it was like an intentional choice, but it just ultimately like left me like very unsatisfied.
Yeah, like I remember like the trailer for Get Out, I remember watching it and being like, why is there a deer? Why is he like in like a kaleidoscope place? And like none of this makes sense. Is this some sort of like paranormal horror movie? And then you come to find out that it's not really any of those things. It's just like an alternate sort of, well, not even really an alternate universe, but just a fictional story.
Right.
That's talking about very real elements. So like everything sort of gets cleared up in Get Out. And like, I think what works so well about Get Out is that the story on the surface, there's nothing left like on the table. There's nothing that you're like, oh, well, what about this? Like all the pieces are there and you can sit there for hours. That's kind of the genius of Get Out, is like you can connect those dots yourself, and the story works fine even if you don't have the time to go back and connect all those dots. It's all there for you to pick up, and the main points are made very clear, so you can just enjoy the story on the surface if you're like a really like dull person who doesn't understand like what the metaphor is about.
100%,
but then when you get the metaphor, it's obviously much deeper and you're able to enjoy it on like two levels. With Us, I feel like that's not necessarily the case, and I feel like he kind of short serves both elements of the story, where the story on the surface gets short served because he's so focused on the metaphor, and the metaphor gets so short served because he's very focused on the story on the surface as well. So we're left in the end where I'm like, even if there's no metaphor going on in this movie, I don't know what really happened with a lot of this stuff. Like, details were just intentionally left out or like glossed over in these like big monologues that characters have. And then for the metaphor, I have no idea.
Yeah, I've definitely separated myself from trying to find a metaphor. Like, that was like my big thing when I first like left this movie. And like the further I get from the viewing of this movie, the more I'm just like, I don't know. I was just,
and I would be okay with that if the story on the surface was more clear, made sense, didn't have these like big like holes in it.
Right.
Because I think that would even be bold. That would be a great choice to make after Get Out, to be like, no, this movie's just about this movie. It doesn't have to be some bigger conversation about something, you know, just enjoy me as a horror director.
Yeah. And it's part of the ambition of this film kind of steals from like the horror a little too. Cause like some of the stuff that's supposed to be horror, you're just kind of like, wait, what? You're just kind of like the wheels are like running in your head, and you don't have time to be like scared. You're just like, what? Like just trying to kind of connect the dots and everything.
Yeah.
At least for me.
I think we can talk about, without spoilers, just some of like, because all their doppelgangers show up in the trailer. So like I think we can talk about like up to even like the home invasion in the plot.
Yeah.
I had a point that I was going to make about that and it like just slipped away.
I mean, I do.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was just going to, like, I think I'm not a big fan of a lot of the performances in this movie.
Okay.
And
talk about that.
I will. I think it's because a lot of the performances there's two halves to them.
Okay.
And I feel like each actor nails like one half of those performances because there's them and then they have to play their doppelgangers as well.
Right.
And I don't think many of them nail both of those performances. Like, I think you look at like the little boy and like I think he absolutely nails the doppelganger aspect of himself because he's fucking creepy, like running around with that little mask on and doing his little noises and stuff. Like, he's got great like control of his body there. And then I don't even want to necessarily say it's a bad performance, but he's just kind of boring as the other kid. Like, I feel like we don't really explore anything about what makes him other than he like keeps using this toy. I think that's also a little bit of poor writing too. Like his character's not really explored. We know more about his doppelganger than we know about him.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have in my note that I think the son is well written. I don't disagree with you at all. I think what I wanted to say, I kind of like the family dynamic. Like, this is a very believable family for a horror film. I think some of like the dad humor kind of falls flat.
Yeah.
I kind of like cringe when like, you know, he's all the kind of like boat related humor like in front of the family. It's like, really, Dad, you bought a boat? And then like, you know, it's you know, some of these elements, you know, come back later and they're important and everything, but like in the moment it's kind of like, make this funnier than like sitcom funny, you know, like just like some of those lines, like, really, Dad, you bought a boat, like they
some
need
of the lines
like,
feel like they need studio laughter.
yeah, exactly. Again, I kind of like really believe I love like the mother and son relationship. And maybe that's just like Lupita kind of doing work with that. Maybe that's not just like the boy, but like the boy's very believable. Like, where the daughter's kind of just like, oh, I'm a track star who's kind of in teenage rebellion. The boy's like a little more of an interesting character where he's kind of like a little more isolated. He's kind of just like that kid who's kind of like, he's like awkward in the family, where he's just kind of like trying to get a trick to work and everyone's just kind of like staring at him and everything.
Yeah, I don't know if that came across as well as I wanted it to.
Right.
And I don't think like the daughter is like incredibly well written either. I just think there's something there to latch on to where like I can tell you something about the daughter, where the daughter is very gifted at track and she's not really very into it. Like,
right.
They're kind of like trying to force her to be whatever. And that sort of like seems like it's saying something, and there's almost seems like there's something between her and the doppelganger where like the doppelganger is also very much like a good runner and like seems like she enjoys the running aspect of it. Like in the one scene she lets the girl get a head start and then runs after her, and that ends up adding to the whole like jumbled metaphor where I thought they were going to be like darker versions of themselves or something, and it just ends up not being related at all, and it was just kind of a detail.
Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff that seems like they're throwing down these threads, and I'm like, oh, you never picked this up at any point ever.
I think my biggest complaint about that is like, and it's in every trailer, it's in every piece of promo for this movie, and Lupita says like, they look like us, they think like us, and I was like, ooh, like, I was like, I bet this is gonna come back. Like, you know, like I wish this movie would use like creative use of that idea. And it never comes up again.
It seems
kind of like, oh, I know how I would think, so I will outsmart the kind of. And it's just kind of like, it's just kind of like a cool throwaway line.
When you look at like the name and the fact that they are like identical twins of them, like it seemed like the movie was gonna be like the metaphor. Like, I couldn't tell what it was from the trailer, but I just kind of had this faith that like, oh, he's going to do something about like looking at yourself and like what's the dark part of yourself. Right. And like, I think like that is intentionally what he sort of wanted, but he has it on like a bigger scale where it's like us being like America or something, and like
Right.
it's just much less compelling than like I thought they were gonna do way more with that. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're starting to teeter on like spoiler stuff too. So if we want to enter the spoiler territory,
the spoilers.
I don't know what that was.
It's a horny dolphin.
Yeah, because okay, now that we're in spoilers, yeah, I don't know. If this movie looks good to you, go see it and turn off the podcast because we're about to spoil it for you. But yeah, no, it is like kind of this. It turns into this thing where it is like us. Like, is it like, oh, the little boy says, oh, it's us, or they're us, or whatever, and like I feel like it's pulled from that. It's pulled from like another metaphor, and then it is kind of like read when they're in that kind of like funny games like scene where they're sitting on the couches like across from each other. What's it called? Red is like, we're Americans or whatever too. And it's really, it's such like a weird wide scale. Like that's part of my complaint with it.
It could have stayed small. It could have just been the four of them and the four of them in the house.
Yeah, because like once you really start to like lose track of like, I don't like, it's just everybody else is dead. That's like a human kind of by the end too. And you're kind of like, I don't have a great grasp of what's going on here now. And it's also kind of, it just gets so busy. It's I don't know.
Yeah, and like talking about the performances, like just kind of going down the line. Like,
yeah, go for it.
Like, I think the kid is good as the doppelganger, but not so great as himself. Part of that's poor writing, I think.
Okay.
I think the girl is good as herself and not so great as the doppelganger. I don't think they gave her doppelganger a whole lot of personality.
She does like a good smile. She does like that like weird truth or dare kind of smile. Like
yeah. And then like Lupita, who's obviously incredibly talented, I kind of blame this on direction and writing a little bit. So like her doppelganger self is obviously, it's crazy, it's wild, it's out there, it's a bold performance. I think it's
a bold choice too.
I think they look at her too long. I think they keep her on screen too long. Where like that voice, which is terrifying when it first happens, you're just like, oh God, like just stop. Then they just let her keep going on this monologue, and it keeps going and going. And like by the end of it, it just kind of feels like the aliens from Signs or something, where you're just kind of like, we saw it. It's not scary anymore. Like you showed the sort of villains way too much. Like there should have been more mystery. Like we really only had like them like not talking in the driveway for like 5 minutes, and then they're in, and then they're all just talking and having a conversation, and there's no mystery anymore, and it's just pure them chasing them. There should have been more mystique. They could have dragged that out a whole lot longer. But I think it just kind of it's Jordan Peele leaving Lupita a little exposed. Like there's just there's too many words for her to say in that voice, and like,
oh my god,
that's a hard voice to nail for like a 10-minute like monologue scene. Like, and it just starts to become funny at a certain point unintentionally. Yeah, and I wasn't scared after a while, and I was just kind of like laughing at like, oh my god, like this is still going. Like
this movie. One of the first things I wanted to say off the bat is I think like this movie kind of I think it has like a really great first and second act, and like he really nails like a lot of these like horror beats and everything, intention and everything. Obviously I still have like some complaints with a lot of like what happens at the first and second act, but then it really starts to collapse under like the ambition of like the third act. I don't know how else to explain it besides I already said ambition. But yeah, it's also just like, man, I know I'm skipping around, but like at the end where they're in the tubes or tunnels at the end, and she's in like the classroom or whatever that is, and she does a fucking like red, that's what we'll like call I think that's what it says on the IMDb. She does like a Bond villain like exposition dump, and it's just so clunky, and it's just like such like a dump of information where it's obviously like Jordan Peele has like everything in his head, and he's kind of like, all right, well, like how am I gonna get this all out? And it's just kind of like, I don't know, maybe like the big bad will just explain it all at the end. And that's one of those things where it's like, no, stop.
Yep,
Like, it's like you're giving us too many details. And it's like, I feel like they fuck up the whole like balance of details and abstraction. Like, I feel like they fuck it up like second one. The minute that fucking like quote pops up like in the beginning, or it's like, there's hundreds of miles, like, under the entire tunnel, like 100 miles tunnels under the United States or whatever. I'm like, nope, you're trying to bring like this scientific plausibility in it, and you're opening all these other doors of just kind of like, it's just kind of like, once you get those wheels spinning, it's just kind of like, well, where'd they get all the tailored jumpsuits and like all this other stuff? Where like nobody's like, hey, why is Jason Voorhees alive again? It's just kind of like, I don't know. This is an abstract idea. Like, nobody cares. Like, we just get into the movie. Where this is like, oh no, but like, listen to this detail and how cool it might sound. And it's kind of like, nope, you're fucking it. You're fucking this movie. Like,
yeah, it kind of just starts to, again, it's a constant struggle in horror. Like, Jordan Peele's not the first one to struggle with this. We're just like,
most definitely, yeah.
Like the more you tell us, the mystique is gone, and it's just not as scary. It's like turning the lights on what was terrifying us before. And like when you kind of start to explain this whole mole people thing, that's when it loses its cool, and we start to be like, well, that doesn't totally make a ton of sense. Like, they just left them down there with not even so much as like a gate to stop them from getting up to the surface. Like,
yeah, and then you're like, man, there's like a puppeteering element between the tethered and the people above ground that like you will never fully understand the logic to. And it's just kind of like, it kind of like takes bits and pieces of like what will work in the movie and everything, and there's stuff that completely doesn't work. Like, I was laughing like on Red Letter Media, Mike was just kind of like, it's like the most ridiculous scene in the movie is where it's like underground and there's like people like pretending they're on a roller coaster or whatever, or people pretending they're like walking on the boardwalk, and you're just like, oh no, what are we doing this for? Like, it's just kind of like,
that's where I feel like the $20 million budget shows, because like everything else looks so good,
right?
But then like in those scenes, it's just kind of like, oh, like this doesn't even look like a military complex. It just looks like a subway or like a
yeah, but the opening quotes is like abandoned tunnels and subways or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like the
but it was supposed to be a military or some type of government operation.
Right. It's like government scientists, I think, like repurposed like abandoned whatever, as a
maybe, I guess, I don't know.
But
again, that's part of the that's part of like you open that door and then you go down. You don't give us enough details.
Rabbit hole, yeah.
Yeah. Pun intended. Rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, to kind of pick up on where I was going with like the performances thing, like I'm saying, like I think he leaves the doppelganger version of Lupita too exposed, and then I feel like she and Winston Duke, who I love Winston Duke in Black Panther, and I'm excited for him to get more roles. I really like a lot of his visibility as being this kind of like chunkier sort of guy who's still seen as like a real hunk. Like, I saw so many like thirst posts on Twitter about Winston Duke from this movie.
Oh, really?
And I'm here for it. Like, I like that kind of representation. I can see like a little bit of like my body in Winston Duke, like a foot shorter, 100 pounds lighter, but like just that sort of like dad bod physique, like being seen as legitimately attractive is cool to me. And I think he was great in Black Panther. I don't think he hides his accent well in this, and I don't think Lupita does either. I think they both do pretty poor American accents.
Oh, I see. I didn't even. Yeah, I didn't catch on with that
because he's from. I forget what the country is.
I didn't even realize.
It works fine in Black Panther because he's allowed to like lean into that, and I also forget where Lupita is. But either way, like just I listening to their accents was like painful for me in this movie, and that's where I feel like their performances are kind of. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not too sure about it. And then Winston Duke, like, as much as I think he's got a lot of personality, the accent thing is one thing, and then I think he does nothing with the doppelganger version of himself. Again, I also don't think they gave his doppelganger anything.
That's just it. That's like, he's just kind of like a dummy. Like, I guess, yeah.
They didn't even really do any like major makeup to him. Like with like, at least with like Lupita, she looks different. With the daughter, like they like pull her hair back like real tight to make her like forehead look huge. And with the kid, he's got obviously like the scars on his face and whatnot. Like they needed to do something with him. I feel like you could have easily done something where he's like blind or something, like, and he's just kind of a big blind strongman oaf type thing.
Right. Yeah. I think there's a lot of like weird misdirection stuff, and like it doesn't even seem like it's on purpose. Like one of my biggest like problems with this movie too is, and I'm not just gonna shit on this movie the whole time, but just they come in and they kind of like, they're not even necessarily terrorizing the family. Like they're just, they walk in, obviously it's like a home invasion movie or whatever, but then like, man, like there's like a good 20 minutes where I was like, oh, they're trying to kill them. Like they're really like kind of like, the boys are like having like a play date in the closet kind of, and like Lupita's like doppelganger's just like pressing her head. Really the only one that's like that threatening is like the Winston Duke one, and he hits his leg and then he's kind of just like dragging him around and everything, or like slowly menacingly like chasing him. The girl, I guess, is also like, that's kind of like freaky, but like I was like, what is their mission? Like kind of, you know, it was just kind of like, oh, what do
they do try to cover that when Red at one point it's like, oh, like I've been waiting for this for a long time, I'm going to make it slow, or take my time or something like that.
And it's but it is just like there is a while but before that like line that I was just kind of like, oh, like what do they want from them? Like, oh, I bet they want to like chain them all up, kind of like Lupita's chained up, and then like wear their clothes and like become them or something, like for the next morning or something. Like I just like it was so like foreign to me that they wanted to kill them, because like everything happening was, it was threatening, but it was also not like lethally threatening, where it was just kind of like, I was like joking about on the way home because I saw this with Sabri. It was like Red's like biggest downfall was that she just kept giving like these like fucking like 15-minute monologues and everything. Or it's just like, it's like, if you want to get shit done, it's like, it seems like everybody else in America,
all the other tethereds are just like, oh, just go fucking kill people.
Right. It's like the Tim Heidecker family.
And then the leader can't even do it.
It's like the Tim Heidecker family went down in, they killed like 4 people in like an instant.
They were efficient.
It was just...
the Tim Heidecker thing was another, where I feel like for a lot of like the like doppelgangers, like I feel like the direction was just kind of like, I don't know, man, be really weird.
Yeah.
Like Tim is the one where it's the most like out in the open. Like him just being like,
when he's like running, when he's like kind of like slowly walking down the stairs after like Winston Duke, like there's like seconds where you're just kind of like, it looks like a Tim and Eric sketch or something. It's just dude, I was also another thing in like retrospect that kind of bothers me is like the distribution of like screen time spent on like Elizabeth Moss. It almost feels like her agent had like a contract that was like, Elizabeth Moss, like, you know, if you want her to be in this movie, you gotta have her like displaying great acting in this movie.
I did think she was the one performance I didn't really have anything to throw at.
But she has
Tim. I like Tim in the real world, and I don't like his doppelganger. I did like both versions of her performance.
But like at times it seems like they're not making us. They're making like an Elizabeth Moss like real kind of like she has the scene where she's like bleeding, like she's the only one that kind of like survives momentarily, and she's bleeding out and crawling away. And like you can really see the emotion, and it's like scary, and like it's scarier than anything that happens in like the main character family house or whatever. And then they kill her, and then when her tethered has like a really great scene where she's like putting on the makeup, and she's fucking like very expressive, very crazy.
She's like almost about to give herself like plastic surgery with like the scissors, like
right,
cutting her own face. And...
She looks like the fucking like Joker, like because she can do like the smile and like the makeup and everything. And I was like, what is the importance of this to the movie? Because none of the other tethered act like this. It was just like so like I was just like, why? There's so much screen time being used here, and it just felt so strange. Besides, like,
although, like, I think the fault is not necessarily spending time on that. It's not giving the other tethereds enough time to do that. Because I think that part is important to what his actual vision for the movie is, which is that these tethereds are trying to untether themselves and live the life that they didn't get to live. And that's one of the only times that I feel like it actually comes across is her putting the lipstick on. Like, that says so much in a short amount of time. Whereas, spooky, like, what the fucking like holding hands thing, like, that's like one of my biggest problems with this movie is the hands across America.
Yeah, that's...
What is that metaphor? And what is that in the real world of this movie? What are they doing?
What?
I mean, I know they're doing the hands across America thing, but what does that mean to them? What do they think they're accomplishing?
Right, that's arguably the most muddled element of this movie. It's very... I don't know.
Like, it just seemed like it's like, I'm like, cool visual, man, but like, why?
Yeah, I mean,
that's the thing. Like, I don't think he's stupid. I think Jordan Peele is
definitely.
We like joke about it being exaggerated. I do think he is a legit genius with a lot of stuff because I think everything he does is intentional. I just don't think he was clear about how everything was going to come across. So I think he put everything he wanted to in this movie, and I don't think he maybe showed this to enough people being like, do you get it? Or he showed it to people who were just like, yeah, man, like it's just as good as Get Out. A bunch of like yes men who weren't like willing to be like, no, this needs a few more drafts, man. Like, no one gets what you're talking about. You need to kill some of your darlings with Lupita with her monologues.
It's also kind of like when, I think they said this on Red Letter Media too, but it's just kind of like at the end when they like reveal that she was actually the tethered. And I know this is I don't think that was like a gigantic reveal. I mean, like, it's obviously like as a director, like Jordan Peele is dropping hints the entire time. I
think I was
but basically at the end when they have when they have the flashbacks or whatever, it's just kind of like they really overdo it on the flashbacks, and it's like, oh, now she's dragging her, now she's chaining her, now she's, you know, it's like all this stuff where it's kind of like, oh no, I already put it together, like, just we didn't need like all those flashbacks of like the little girl or whatever.
I'm trying to, when did the flashbacks happen? Were they during her Lupita's monologue or?
No, it's just like, I think it's when in the final scene when they're driving away and she's driving and she's kind of like remembering, I think.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like they do one flashback and you're like, oh my gosh, she's the tethered. And then they do like 4 more and you're just kind of like, stop it. I know I could put the pieces together, but please. I
mean, I don't really have a problem with that, because I think most of the problem with the movie is the things that are unclear. So like the one thing that like is clear, I think, is the twist. So I can't really throw stones at that because it seems like the one part that he did makes sense.
And they also like hypothesize in Red Letter Media that it's just kind of like, you know, you want people in the middle of the country to get this. You know, like they should be able to get the twist too. So kind of beat them over the head. But just, again, the biggest complaint that I have is just, it's the fine balance of how much you explain of how it works. You know, it's like we say a lot, it's what are the rules, you know, in this movie or whatever. And then he just like fundamentally like doesn't get the balance.
Yeah.
The movie, like, if the movie wanted to work on like a level of abstraction that didn't raise, like, if the movie wanted to like work on a level of abstraction that didn't like raise my expectation to have like an explanation, the movie wouldn't like have started with like that quote at the beginning. Like, that was just like, I don't know, that was just like where it all started falling apart for me. Well, actually, just more so the third act, but I don't know. And there's like no easy fix too. Like again, Jordan Peele's not a dummy. This is all very intentional, like you said.
And this thing is like,
but it is
the
just,
fact that we like, I know that he's so intentional because of just watching stuff of him talking about Get Out, and like following him on Twitter is really great, especially in like the year or two after Get Out came out, where he's very responsive. He'll respond to a lot of fans on Twitter. So like a lot of people were sending him stuff that was like, oh, I just noticed like how this connects to this and Get Out. Like, I wonder if Jordan Peele intended that. And he'll respond and basically be like, yeah, like,
of course I did.
Yeah, man, I totally. He could be fucking with us, but like, it seems like he's the type of guy where he like every scene is an homage to something outside of the film or within the film itself. It's a callback to something or a foreshadowing of something in the future, or a sideways reference to some other piece of pop culture that he's enjoying. And like, knowing that about him and then watching this movie, like, I'm looking at everything and being like, well, what is this supposed to connect to? And I feel like he throws down a lot of false threads. And like I honestly don't buy that there's anyone who like fully got this movie watching it. Right. Like I'm sure people got the twists and some of the stuff with the surface level of the story, but I don't think anybody really got the message of this movie on first try. And maybe that's not the type of movie he wanted to make. Maybe he wanted to make a movie that you had to go back and watch it a few times. But I think if you're going to make that type of movie, then the surface level thing has to be like top notch. Like you can't spend as much time on the metaphor as you did on this, and that needs to be more of like a reward for going back and watching rather than something that's hurting the initial watching of this movie. Right. Like I remember the like after the initial scene of this movie, the like flashback to 19 whatever at the carnival, like that whole setup thing, and then we have like the title sequence of this movie, which is like the slow pullback of the rabbits in the cages, and like the shot is so long, and it's like all these like white rabbits, and then there's like one or two like black or brown rabbits, and like I'm watching that going like, okay, we got another like race message going on here, and I keep looking throughout the rest of the movie for something about that to like tie in, and I still think that has to be intentional, but he throws down these threads and he doesn't really help us pick them back up. And like all the other like explanations or theories that I've heard about what the metaphor is have to do more with like homelessness and underserved elements of like America, because that's what Hands Across America was about, was fighting hunger and homelessness and stuff like that in America.
Yeah, I mean, if you had to say what you thought this movie was about, what would you say? Like, what was your reading?
What was my reading, or what is it now?
Both. I don't know. Just
when
like
I came out of the theater, I had no fucking idea.
Oh, okay.
It was the type of movie where I was like, I'm a smart guy. I don't watch movies passively, you know, like, and I felt like I kind of got like gypped because it just felt like the only thing that was there was the twist at the end and some cool visual thrills. I also think the soundtrack's fucking awesome in this movie. Really great. And I'm glad that he utilized what's his name, Michael Abels, more than he did in Get Out, where I felt like Get Out had a lot of other soundtrack songs in it, and this had a few still. I'm not a fan when he throws, he tends to throw like a song that like has a lot of like vocals going on in it, and it meshes weird with like the soundtrack that Michael Abels does, because it's not the same style at all.
What, like when they kind of do like the orchestral I Got 5 on it?
The orchestral?
Or just the
I Got 5 on it, I didn't mind, because that was part of the story. It's playing through the radio in the car. I thought that was really nice. There's one song...
But then there's one song at the end with like the kind of... when she's doing like the Bond villain kind of exposition dump, and then she kills Red. And they kind of have like this repurposed version of it.
I didn't even pick up on that. So that wasn't one of the ones
the trailer too.
I think there's only one song that's just like I don't know what song it was. It felt like it could have been pulled off the radio from current day, and it's not like it's playing in the car and they're listening to it. Like those type of songs I'm okay with. Right. it's soundtrack music. It's
Background,
happening
yeah.
for
Okay.
us
Oh, okay.
to
Soundtrack.
cover up whatever is going on in the movie. And I thought he did that a bunch in Get Out, and I wasn't a fan of that. I was like, you got this really great soundtrack going on. Just be consistent with your tone. You don't need to throw a bunch of like bangers in here.
Right. Yeah.
Where did I start off this point going? I can't remember.
So what is your takeaway now?
I think
or
now,
just
after having read some reviews of the movie, I think the signs point to it being about homelessness.
Okay.
But I still think that whole metaphor is underserved and not clear. And like, I can say that that's what I think it's about, but I don't have a message about it. I don't know what the story really says about it.
Yeah. I came out pretty confused, and I slowly kind of like pieced it together. I mean, they definitely kind of like really hit you with the obvious stuff with like, there's like obviously like a competition between like what's it called, like Winston Duke and like Tim Heidecker, kind of just like, and then you throw like the tethered into it, and then it really starts to feel like the classism kind of thing. You know, there's the upper class and lower class.
But I also felt like if that was the case,
right,
then this family would have become like true tragic, like it would have been a real horror movie, and they all would have died because they were of some means. He's buying a boat. I mean, he's definitely buying a lesser boat. He's like a lower class than Tim Heidecker's family, but they've got a family home in Santa Monica or whatever it is. And
right.
You know,
yeah.
they can afford to take this nice vacation. The car that they drive is pretty fucking nice. Like,
yeah, I can't.
It's a station wagon, but it's got like leather seats and like a pretty nice interior. Like,
right. They're just kind of, they're just kind of keeping up with the Joneses. Like, they're well off, but now they're keeping up with the Joneses kind of thing. Where it's not like you're struggling to survive.
Like, if that was the point, then they probably all die in the movie, because then if that's the point, then the tethered are supposed to represent the lower class, and the tethered should really be the heroes of the movie. But
then she is the tethered at the end, which started to like, I kind of started to, I mean, what I got from the movie was that there's like upper class and lower class, and you know, if you're benefiting, like somebody underneath you is getting like screwed over, and all these people that you know, like consciously or subconsciously like think you're better than, like you're not, like given the same opportunities, you know, they could thrive too in your position. It's kind of like that like there, but for the grace of God go I, or whatever, the John Bradford, where it's like, you know, recognition that others' misfortune could be like one's own. And like, you know, we're all, I think I was watching something with like Winston Duke where he talked about like, we're all kind of like complicit in suppressing someone else. You know, like your privilege is contributing to someone else's like suffering or whatever. I don't know. It seems like it kind of stems off from like the original like American Sin, where it's kind of like, gotta live that fucking American dream, gotta get to the top, and it doesn't matter like who you leave in your wake. I don't know.
I was just looking up because I remember I looked this up after I came out of the movie, the Bible verse that the guy has, the Jeremiah 11:11.
What is that? I didn't even look that up.
I feel like I have to look up the full passage, because the verse itself doesn't really give you a lot. The verse itself is, "Therefore, this is what the Lord says, I will bring on them a disaster they cannot escape. Although they cry out to me, I will not listen to them." So that kind of speaks to like the tethered coming up. I remember reading it and being like, oh, this kind of sheds a little bit of light.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a article from the Wrap. Yeah, like that's the thing. Like I don't think Jordan Peele's intention was to confuse anybody, and I don't think that he thinks that the messages he's putting out there are unclear. Right. I think he has a very specific message, and I think he threw maybe too many ideas at the wall and didn't have enough people helping him view his own movie through like an outside lens and being like, this is not coming across.
Right.
Yeah, because like even like the articles that I read, like driving home from the theater or I was in the passenger seat. I'm not like, oh, I gotta figure this movie out.
Like swerving all over the road.
What does it mean?
Oh, this is an allegory for the
Like even like the articles that I looked up about the movie were like, it's very unclear like what the movie's about, and that's part of the genius of the movie. Like even they are admitting.
I hate those fucking I hate when people say that. Yeah,
and I just wanted to be like, just admit that it didn't come across as clear that as he wanted it to be. Like there's so many like striking moments in this movie that I can't accept a reality where Jordan Peele was just kind of like, yeah, I don't know, I just want people to take whatever they want to get out of it. I think he has a very clear message he's trying to get across, and I think unfortunately he just failed in this movie. I don't think that makes him any less of a genius,
right?
You know, I think it's just sometimes it doesn't work.
And I also like don't to, you know, and like maybe I'm reading too far into it, and maybe like it's also kind of cool that you can just kind of have this straight up horror movie, and then if you want to peel back some layers you can see some stuff, but again, I get caught up in the details where it's just kind of like, all right, well, this is just not logical in the universe you've presented to us, kind of. So yeah, because I did talk with some people who are just kind of like, oh yeah, I don't think there's any like metaphor or whatever, or I don't think there's supposed to be a metaphor or whatever, and it seems like their defense. I think that's
worse. I would think this movie was like god awful if there wasn't a metaphor that I just thought I wasn't getting about it.
Right.
Because I think what's on the surface is like some scares that, hey kitty, fade out really quickly. Mm-hmm. Like I think the movie starts out scary and then just kind of gets real old real fast. I think there's like a real glimmer of like horror greatness in the scene in the Heidecker house. Mm-hmm. Like what's the Beach Boys song that they have playing? Is it Beach Boys or?
Yeah, it is Beach Boys. I don't remember which one though.
It's a nice pair. I mean, the idea has been done before, like a kind of happy song.
Oh right.
During a like bloodbath, and I thought they had like, because that's what I also kind of felt like Get Out was missing a little bit, was like a little bit of like gore in like a horror movie, like.
Oh right.
And this like really brought the gore in that scene and the intensity. Like that was a part where I was like, it doesn't matter what the metaphor is, I'm just like fully in tune with what's going on here. But then I think you kind of lose that later on, and like I said, like the family loses its mystique. They're just kind of weird people chasing them at a certain point, and they don't seem to be terribly good at it. They haven't actually killed anyone in the family, so we're not terribly scared for the family. Like I never really, besides I thought the boat scene was kind of good. Like the whole like
it's a nice like horror set piece.
Yeah, like being in the water and then realizing that the guy was in the water with him as well. Stuff like that I think worked pretty well. But it all just kind of like by the end of it I was just kind of like, okay, like this isn't really working on like any level for me, and it's kind of dragging, and I'm kind of getting bored here, and I'm like waiting for like the metaphor to sink in, and it's not really working. And then like her like going down into the like tunnels, like that seemed like that was like setting up for like, oh god, like we're gonna get into like some real shit now. And then that was really underwhelming, because it was just like, oh, it's just Lupita down there, and I didn't fully understand everything about that sort of like dance scene that they did together. Like they're like overlaying it with like the dancing, and that seemed like that was gonna say something,
right?
And I wasn't fully getting it. Like I'm guessing it has to do with just the one Red, quote unquote, being more graceful than Adelaide, or I guess it's the other way around. Adelaide being more graceful than Red,
right?
And Red is the one that we thought was Adelaide, so she's able to like evade her attacks. But like, I don't know, it seems like it's trying to say something bigger, but that's all it really gets across.
I mean, I like the flashback kind of elements of the dance, because I mean, like because they switched places, and then you have her like kind of like dancing down but with the tethered, and the tethered witness this, they're like, wow, like this really looks like something like we've never seen something like this before. This is something that can like lead us out of this. And I like that element because it is like kind of like they kind of like bring up like art as like, you know, get her into whatever, like, you know, art is therapeutic, like it's gonna get her start talking or whatever. And then like, you know, down there it's kind of like, oh, like art can bring people together to like create some sort of like resistance and everything. And I like those elements. I mean, just to talk about like shit that I liked in this movie too, because I think this movie was net positive for me. I really love the younger Lupita scenes. Absolutely gorgeous scenes. Whoever was playing like her like drunk dad is like really great too. That family dynamic is really great. I think like even their family dynamic that they have is really great. I think there's a lot of great acting going on here, and that's when like if people like really love this movie, like I get it. Like it's just kind of like, oh yeah, there's a ton of like really like great horror elements in here. There's a lot of really great performances. This movie looks great, and like, you know, maybe that can cause you to like overlook like things that like really started to make me like scratch my head at the end, and everything. Circling back around the things I didn't like.
And now back to this.
You know what scene really bugged me? And like, I think Jordan Peele must have like really loved it. But when Red is in the foreground, like at the chalkboard,
oh god,
and then it's just like it looks like something we literally did in college, like if we wanted to have like a clone fight or something. And just like the minute you have like I don't know, it's like that's something you shoot like two real people with, and it doesn't look real. Kind of when you shoot that way where somebody's like really out of focus and like you're watching their clone talk. I don't know. You're shifting focus.
I think what the real problem is that like he wasn't willing to accept another angle based on the physical dimensions of that room. Because the problem is that he wants to have that like she's in the foreground and Adelaide, quote unquote, is in the background, but Red is like face up against a chalkboard. So there's no room for a fucking camera. So like to like even like, you know, they obviously don't shoot with the chalkboard there, they remove whatever,
right, they cheat it, right,
but even to like make that illusion of the camera being sort of where the chalkboard is, it has to be like right in front of her face, so you get this like really weird like blur on the edge, and like they can't like totally blur her, so they like leave like a little bit of like sharpness to her face. It just starts to look fake. You start to like believe that there's a green screen being used there rather than it actually being two real people and doing whatever, and it looks awkward as fuck. The problem, and like I think someone who wasn't so tied to like if someone maybe was less visionary and just more practical, like, and it wasn't like, oh, we need to have this shot, right, like would have been like, all right, like we can just sort of cheat the angle a little bit somewhere. And, you know, maybe we can't see someone's full face, or I don't know, maybe she doesn't have to be at the chalkboard.
Right. Yeah.
It seemed like he wasn't willing to make a sacrifice in that scene, and it ended up really hurting that shot.
They also use it gratuitously. It's just kind of like...
it's really the only angle we get in that besides seeing her from behind.
I honestly probably wouldn't even remember it, but we return to it at least once, probably more, and it's also a very lingering shot, and it's also an ambitious shot, so it's something that looks like they think it's impressive, but it's actually like, it irks me. Oh yeah, personally.
I mean, we're not shooting video this week, but when Joe brought up that shot, I like put my head in my hands.
Right? Yeah, it's just,
it pains me to think about that shot.
The worst. Man, us though, like really overall strikes me as I was like cracking up, like I think listening to somebody talk about this movie, where it's like, man, like all the framing is so good, and like the way this movie is very professionally made. I can't argue with that. It's some very beautiful shots or whatever, but they were just like, you would never know this is somebody's second movie. And I was like, au contraire, like, you know, like this is like 100% screams somebody's second movie. It's kind of like watching
They up the stakes, and their talent hadn't really risen to being able to handle that yet.
Right.
Yeah.
It's watching Ex Machina, and then it's watching Annihilation. Yeah. That's what Get Out and this movie is. It's just I don't know. It's also like and
it's just even the most talented people making their sophomore effort in anything after a really successful debut, it's just always going to disappoint. Nothing is going to
of course
be as good as Get Out was when we didn't have those expectations for him, and nothing will be again, even if maybe the talent rises up above that at some point. The expectations will still be there to meet it.
Yeah, and again, I've brought it up a million times, but I feel like my thesis on this movie would always boil down to kind of there's two different elements I can kind of poke at, where it was kind of like Get Out had some details that would usually challenge your suspension of disbelief. It's pretty wacky, that movie. They're removing people's brains and putting them in other people's bodies. That's pretty wild, but it's so well executed that
they explain the things they need to explain, and they leave vague the things that they need to leave vague. They don't go into the science of how does it work that the brain, whatever, but they give us enough in the performances where it just, we buy it,
But it's so well executed that it's not really a problem. Is at least what I took away from it. And then Us challenges you to suspend your disbelief, just on a whole other level, where it's just kind of the Knights of whatever that's within this community. We get to see how this community acts, and we can see how something like this might be a little more they're under the radar, and they're white and whatever, and they're liberal. No one would expect it. Because that movie's all about liberal racism and performative wokeness and everything. It all works and everything. But then Us ask you to be we're going to have some motherfuckers you never heard of hold hands across the entire country, and you're just your mind's fucking expanding, and you're just I can't suspend my disbelief anymore. I'm sorry. It's just it again. Very intentional choices in this movie. But like we said before, I think if it's just one home invasion, or even in Red Letter Media, they were maybe it's just kind of in this neighborhood, or it's just kind of it's you could come up with all these different ideas, but the minute you go across the whole United States, it just gets so wacky. It's I don't know.
And not to harp on that, but that whole Hands Across America thing, it doesn't make sense logically. It doesn't make sense symbolically. It just seems literally a visual reference, a visual homage to something from the 80s or 90s, I guess.
In our history, I'm not so super informed on Hands Across America.
No, I think it was a poor choice in that way too. I had to read up on it because it's something for an older generation, and that's not what his target demographic is anymore.
Yeah,
not anymore, but never was. He's not targeting 40-year-old dudes, or 40-year-old people rather. You don't have to be a dude to know that.
Right. But I always got. You saw that and you recognized it, though, right? It was in the back of my brain somewhere, kind of. I was I know what that is.
It was one of those things that I had heard referenced before. I'd never really read up on Hands Across America. If someone said Hands Across America, I'd just be oh, yeah, okay.
Right.
But I did have to read up on it and be oh, that was an actual thing that people tried to do, and it was a failed charity.
That commercial looks so familiar to me. I know he almost uses the same commercial, basically. But yeah, all I really know about it, and I haven't even researched it since, is that it was just kind of a goof. It was just kind of a very ambitious, not unlike this movie. It was very ambitious.
It was a promotional stunt sort of for a charity that raised a lot of money and didn't give a lot of money to the actual affected people.
Right.
Well, and also fell short of its fundraising goals.
Right. I think they spent a ton of money organizing it, and
then
barely made back the money with everything that was happening or whatever. And then I don't know, by the time you reach that,
and I think
at the end of this film, and you really don't see it until the very end of this film, and it's a very like arresting kind of like visually like cool, like God, like them over the mountains and the helicopters like looking down on it. It looks so cool, but it's just like it just feels so thrown in and so messy.
It's thin and it's empty. Like the reference to having a reference to Hands Across America is not the bad decision, maybe, because that sort of does speak to, you know, like Get Out is sort of about like performative wokeness, as you called it. There's also like you can be like a performative like altruist.
Yeah,
that's sort of what that's about. But that doesn't make sense for the tethered people to be doing it. Like, if the final scene of this was like everyone being like, the way to stop the tethered is to like do this whatever thing, like that might sort of make a little more sense. But yeah, I don't know. It's not. They didn't need to do it.
Like, yeah,
it would have made way more sense for the movie if the people coming up the tethered, their whole point was to kill the people they were tethered to and then take over their lives and get to live the life they never got to live, you know. Because then that starts to make sense to me. Like, okay, it's the lower class overthrowing the upper class, and it's us getting to live the life that we want to live.
And I'm sure we can pull, you know, any of our friends that saw this or anybody off the street who could kind of give us like an explanation, and it still wouldn't be super satisfying. Like I could be like, oh, you know, Hands Across America, it was a pretty empty gesture, but I mean, so is going, you know, above ground and killing your tethered, because they didn't do that to you. That's undeserving, kind of. Or, you know, like Hands Across America, it's about like, you know, maybe like that shirt. Doesn't she have like a Hands Across America shirt or whatever? They
when they leave Adelaide down,
or just
in the tunnels, that's the shirt she's wearing underneath the Thriller shirt.
Oh, okay, and then like Adelaide is down there, and she didn't see like, you know, she's a child that didn't get to see like kind of what a mess Hands Across America was. It's just kind of this like romantic vision that, of course, like any kid would be like, oh, that's cool, and you're like helping out like this cause, and now that she's like the kind of victim of this cause, would be like, that would be a great gesture if we went up there and did it. But I can't see from...
But then that doesn't fit with them killing everybody.
Right, you're right. It's
if
just...
they just were being creepy up above ground and did that, like, and it's just this whole thing where like the whole world is watching. What does the tethered lion mean? Like,
yeah.
Again, not a great horror movie, but that makes more sense with the story.
And I like the scissors, you know, they're kind of
I like the visual. I just wanted
Yeah.
more explanation of the jumpsuits, and
because they started to feed you details, and you say, okay, well, yeah, give me
the
a few
details
more
about the stuff that I want,
and then it would
know
make
about.
sense. And it's just kind of like, if they gave you no details, you'd be like, oh, this is a weird abstract movie. And you know, I don't know, it's just I've said this a million times, so let's get into some fingers if you don't mind.
Like the only thing
or do you want to what else do you want to cover?
Well, it was just literally just tailing off that point. Like the only thing I can think of is like the red has to do with like the Thriller music video, because she's wearing the shirt.
Yeah,
and they do have the one, they wear a glove on one hand, but I don't know. It's again, I think Jordan Peele has an explanation. He's just not giving it to us.
Right. Yeah. And again, it's that fucking balance, man. You got to strike that balance. Yeah, it's even like kind of like the system of oppression is just like very poorly explained. It's kind of like, I don't really know. I don't know.
Yeah, like it's like I guess they're all supposed to like sort of be tied to the people above ground. It's tough because we only get to see it really like sort of after they've untethered themselves, which I guess is because Adelaide is able to teach them how to do it. And that's sort of the importance of the dancing thing. It's like, oh, like she can do that. I don't know if they don't know that she's a person from above ground. Like if they think she's one of them who got converted to being able to do whatever. Yeah, like that just, the whole thing is lost on me.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can get into some finger rains.
All right.
On review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an approval rating of 94% based on 397 reviews with an average rating of 7.87 out of 10. Excuse me, Rona season. The website's critical consensus reads, with Jordan Peele's second inventive, ambitious horror film, we have seen how to beat the sophomore jinx, and it is us. Yeah, I don't agree.
Yeah. 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 I'm stuck between two scores in my head. It's still the same scores even before I got here.
I can go first. I know my score.
Oh, okay, yeah, go for it then. Yeah,
I don't
hear a little
necessarily know what my closing thoughts are.
I mean, we've talked a lot.
Yeah.
I don't have a whole lot to
I might just open with my score. Hold on. I didn't set up the spreadsheet.
No problem.
I think maybe I came across a little harsh in my review here. I definitely have a net negative view of the movie, but it's not the worst movie I've ever seen. There's some very skilled elements of it. I really think the soundtrack is beautiful. It's been stuck in my head that
right.
where it's got the low cello and then the high plucking sound is really neat. I think they did a lot of inventive stuff with that. I think elements of the performances can be great. Lupita namely being the one. Again, I just think she was left out there too long, but there are parts of her physical performance that I think are great. She gives you a lot of jump scares that aren't typical jump scares, and they're just because her body does unexpected things. I think in that classroom scene, when she just kind of starts walking backwards, the whole theater's whoa, stop that. No, none of that. I think that speaks to a good performance. I just think it's maybe not as intensely great as everyone's talking about, mainly just because that accent bugs me, and that voice loses its shine real quick. And I think it looks fantastic as a movie. There's a lot of, you can take a screenshot of any part of this movie and besides the chalkboard scene and be oh, this is great. This is just beautiful lighting, well framed. Everything just looks good. Looking at some very attractive people on screen, it just all looks great. But yeah, like I've said, I think the metaphors is jumbled. I think the reality of the movie is jumbled, both in what happens in the physical plot of the movie, and just sort of, I think the tone of the movie gets kind of messed up, mainly just because the horror starts to fade. It's got the creepy home invasion horror for a little bit, and then it turns into slasher horror for a little bit, and then they at some points try to throw in a little horror comedy a little bit when the kids start killing tethered,
right, yeah.
But it's not laugh out loud funny. It's just kind of in this weird area where I'm I don't know, I'm not really ready to laugh at a kid killing somebody and not really reacting appropriately.
I do when they're arguing over who has the highest body count or whatever. It's I should drive. I have the highest body count.
That felt weird to me. That felt out of left field for the movie. I feel if more of the movie had been like that, I would have been yeah, that's a funny conceit.
Right, yeah.
But I remember in the theater being I don't know. I don't know if I'm really along for that ride. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of all over the place for me. I really wanted to like this. But it just didn't really speak to me on any real level. I wanted to be more scared by it, and I just started out freaked out at moments, and then if I had been watching this at home, I wouldn't have even thought about reaching for a pillow after the first 10 minutes of the home invasion scene, where you're just kind of okay,
yeah,
you've shown all your cards at this point. There's nothing really left to be scared of, and then even then it doesn't really seem like it's a really intense, crazy plot enough to really keep me on board. So I'm gonna give it 2 fingers. I think it's below average. I think there's enough aesthetic value, and I trust that there's a version somewhere in Jordan Peele's mind that makes more sense. I don't think this is someone aimlessly making a movie and not knowing what they're doing. I just think this is someone who could have used a few more drafts and maybe a little bit more outside direction to make a better version of this movie. So yeah, 2 fingers from me.
All right. Yeah. Again, I just feel like this movie would be so much better if it was just like a little more localized. Just because it gets so muddled with, you know, the Hands Across America thing. And I know, like, something I wanted to say is I know he almost, like, puts that in there because, like, he wanted it to be, like, oh, this is about America. And it's like, how can I do that without it, like, being all across America? Which is just kind of easy. Like, you would just do it, like, Get Out. Like, it's a microcosm, kind of what's actually happening. Again, yeah.
Nobody watched Get Out and was like, oh, that's not about me.
Right, yeah.
That's only those people.
Oh, well, that's happening in that specific community. This is not...
Must suck to be those people watching this movie.
Yeah. I mean, I do... Yeah, again, I'm not, like, fully on board with Lupita's performance. I mean, I also don't have a lot of faith in movies in 2019. I mean, if you listen to the introduction of this episode, I think that has a lot to do with, like, why this podcast is going to come to an end this year. Because we're just going to start to see a lot of the same shit. And honestly, Lupita might be the most deserving and win just Best Actress. It's highly believable that nobody will have a better performance than this. And I have, like, a lot of critiques, but I mean, again, I do think a lot of that stems back to the direction or maybe the way that you would cut this film, where it's kind of like, why? You have somebody who has, like, tremendous talent in front of you. Lupita is just... She's used in the weirdest ways in Hollywood. I mean, like, there's this, and there's a bunch of, like, tiny examples, and then there's, like, also, like, just, like, her Star Wars character. It's like, why? Why would you use her like this? Like, it's just fucking bizarre. Like, what's it called? But it's, I mean, again, where it's not just the directing, but it's like a lot of the acting kind of gives you these hints that she is the tethered. Like a lot of the movie where, you know, I love when she is killing kind of the red character and she starts to have like a crazy smile and starts to make kind of like these like guttural clicking noises too that, you know, the tethered character makes too. And it's just kind of like, whoa, this is wild kind of. And you're like, I know where this is going now. Or even just like, this is writing and directing. That is good. It's when she is always kind of like the first one to get out of the car and be like, I'm going to finish this off, or like, I know how to deal with these people. You know, you could also hypothesize that like, oh, she's the only person in America that's had like contact with these people, but just there is like that tender moment with like the kind of like tethered daughter who's dying. And then there's also like this expression that she gives when like the son walks into fire, and you're kind of like, there's something more here kind of, or it's just, you know, it's also just like what I was talking about, like my main takeaway from the movie, where it's just kind of like, you know, you step over like a homeless person, and it's not just, you know, it's having a certain amount of empathy where it's kind of like, that could be me, that could be my dad, or like in Annie Hall, it's like when they look at like Diane Keaton like looks at like a homeless person, she's like, that was somebody's baby at some point. That's like just fucking weird that they're laying in the street right now. Yeah, I read a lot of political interpretations of this movie online that I just like didn't agree with at all. It was just kind of like, and people are all holding hands across America because that's like the wall that Donald Trump has, and they're all dressed in red because that is the color of the Republican Party, and Trump is their ringleader. And it was just kind of, I was like, okay, we're looking too far into this. But yeah, oh, also, the last thing I wanted to ask you about was, what did you think of that, like, kind of look between the mom and the son at the end? I kind of really like that, but it almost meant too many things, or it's just kind of like, it's like a great, like, kind of, hey, like, they've had this relationship the whole time. Like, they obviously have maybe the strongest bond in the family, like the mom and the son. And there is something where it's kind of like, hey, we're stronger because of this, like, trauma. But then there's also kind of like, I know Jordan Peele also wanted to work in kind of like that look kind of where it's kind of like, like looking back at you, and the son's like, oh no, I know what she really is, and it's kind of like a Twilight Zone like last scene.
No, that's what I took it to mean.
Oh, okay,
I thought it was him because he's suspicious of her earlier.
Right.
I think Jordan Peele kind of just shoots himself in the foot with that though, because like those scenes are great. Like I think when he walks in on her being like animalistic, like really going in and enjoying killing the one tethered or whatever and making the noises, and the son gives her the look like okay, and then he kind of gives her the same look in the car. And I think the fact that he like puts on the mask, that's like kind of like his like defense mechanism. Like that's him realizing like, oh, like this isn't over yet. Like that's kind of like the villain coming back at the end of like a horror movie, you know, like the hand sticking out of the grave or whatever.
Right.
And I think they kind of screw themselves over because they also have a lot of other scenes where the other people really take joy in killing the tethereds. Like the daughter specifically, like really going in on one of like the twins, and like the kid doesn't give her the same look that he gives the mom. Like that just kind of that muddies that whole through line that he's trying to have there.
Right.
So you could have just very easily like had the daughter kill the tethered and not enjoy it and be really emotionally distressed by the fact that she just like killed something, you know, like really easy choice. Have the daughter cry there. We're fine. Rather than have her be like, yeah, I'm an action star now and this is cool. Like if you cut that out, then that whole thing is much clearer. And then the son reacts to the mom doing whatever. And he's like, okay, I've never seen mom act like that before. That's weird. Right. And then when he makes the look at the end, I think that's truly clear there.
Yeah.
Did you have a different read on that? Or?
Oh, no, it was just like literally what I said before. Kind of there's both the just kind of this makes us stronger as a family and just kind of last scene of a Twilight Zone episode.
No, I didn't even consider another reading of that. It just seemed to me because of the mask thing, like, and he kind of like shrinks back. Like he has a look that's not, he doesn't think she's going to kill him right there, but it kind of seems like he's like, oh, like shit's about to hit the fan, like,
right?
Eventually.
Yeah. Besides that, I would agree with almost every review I've read or listened or watched. A lot of people definitely compare this to like Shyamalan. I do feel like this movie's a little Shyamalan-esque. It kind of like
he knows how to keep it small scale though. Like,
yeah, that's true.
Or early Shyamalan,
right? No,
the Shyamalan that we know as M. Night Shyamalan. Yeah.
But this does like remind me of better Shyamalan film. I'd almost like prefer this. Like if Shyamalan was making stuff like this, I'd be like, oh, okay. Like instead of kind of like I liked Glass, but it was just kind of like, I don't know if there was a reason to make Glass, kind of. Like, I'd much rather him be working on stuff like this. I don't know. I think what I want to end on is just... I think this is, like, a sophomore film. I think that's, you know, it's... No matter what kind of sophomore effort you're putting out as an artist or whatever, whether it's a film or album or novel or whatever, I think it's always going to get compared to Get Out. Or
no matter what you do,
it's no matter who you are, get compared to Jordan Peele's Get Out. Going to be compared to Jordan Peele's first film, Get Out. Rona season, baby. I don't know. So I don't want to go too hard on this just because I wasn't like, again, like the whole, what's it called? The Ex Machina annihilation thing. Because I really liked that. And in retrospect, I actually don't like that movie as much as I thought I did.
Annihilation.
Yeah. Annihilation.
I think I came up on it actually.
Oh, really? Okay.
So we probably meet in the middle somewhere.
Yeah, we'll meet in the middle. So yeah, I feel like I'm going to preemptively dial my score back a little, just by like a half a finger. And I'm gonna land on, oh fuck, actually I don't know. Now fuck it, I'll dial it back up a fucking half finger. I'm gonna go with 4 fingers.
Oh damn.
Yeah, because I think this might be the last good film we see in this podcast. We're entering... Rona season's gonna get real hot in the summer, and I think we're just gonna see a whole bunch of fucking superhero movies, and I don't know if we're gonna see anything better than this. Honestly, it's honestly just better to see a film that's ambitious.
It is original. You got to give it that.
It is, and it's bursting with ideas, and again, it's super ambitious. I've said ambitious a lot. It's both the downfall and like kind of also why I really enjoyed this movie. It's probably why a lot of people enjoy it. And I'd rather see that than some fucking hack job. You know, I'd rather see somebody's vision than tune in next week for Dumbo when when you see no trace of a director in it. You get to see just full, unadulterated fucking Jordan Peele. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think I was reading something online. Last thought, I was reading something online where this was had the highest grossing weekend of something that was completely like original, not based on a previous property, like film, movie, since like Avatar or something. And it's a fucking long time ago. And that's fucking insane.
I can't remember if we talked about this on the podcast or off, but there was like a graphic I saw that was like all the movies that have been number one at the box office in the past 10 or 20 years that haven't been sequels or remakes or like whatever. And like there was like this and like Happy Death Day and like a bunch of other like movies like from way earlier in the decade and the past 20 years, really.
Right.
It was a sad list. I don't know if the list even made it to 10. It might have been like 9.
So that's kind of where I land on the 4, because I feel some sort of like signal boost, kind of like, God, we need more of this, even if it's not doesn't totally work at the end. Mm-hmm. I still enjoyed it front to back. Yeah. So I'll leave off on that. I'll stop fucking yammering.
All right, so that'll come to 3 fingers, right down the middle for us. Down the middle of 4 and 2, not
right. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait for Avengers Endgame to come out and be the first perfect movie that we review on this.
Oh yeah,
because we're both gonna give that 5 fingers. Right?
I love that film. Can't wait for it.
I love it already. I can't wait for it. I was just thinking about that when you were saying like, oh, this is gonna be the best movie we review this year. I was like, oh,
well, the Avengers is still good.
Endgame's gonna come out, right?
It's just kind of like I was reading some article about like old people who like are just trying to stay alive until like the Mueller report came out. I'm sorry, old people. Not a
Rest in peace.
The Mueller report came out and they're like, ah, shit. Yeah, fucking blow their brains out. I was just thinking of people who are just like, I gotta stay alive till Endgame. Because you know they're out there. You know, like some old man is out there and like, I don't know, I kind of want to see how Infinity War sequel pans out. Does Thanos get away with it?
I feel like there's more people who are concerned with where Ant-Man is going to go on.
Oh, yes.
Thanos' anatomy.
Yes. Is he going to go up the butt?
All right. Well, I think that's about it, right?
Yeah, that's everything.
Tune in in 2 weeks from now for our review of Dumbo. And
barely directed by Tim Burton.
Barely directed by Tim Burton. And yeah, I guess you probably heard the announcement in the beginning of this episode, so cherish your time with us.
Yeah.
Because it's ticking away. Rona season, baby.
Hey, go pick up a 6-pack of Ronas and tune in to Steve Will Do It on Instagram.
Yeah, and also check out our merch store, howmanyfingerspodcast.bigcartel.com. We're going to throw some sales up on there.
Oh, yeah.
Try to get rid of the last of this merch. get it now. It'll be a limited edition item because we're never printing this stuff again. So
right, yeah. If
Pick
you
it up.
ever wanted to rep the podcast, your days are numbered.
if you want to buy a T-shirt that people can ask you, oh, what's that? And you can say, oh, it's a podcast that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, it's a podcast that ended.
It's vintage. It's cool.
Yeah, right?
People do that with bands all the time. But yeah, check us out in 2 weeks for Dumbo. We'll see you there. Signing out for How Many Fingers, the podcast. I'm Mike.
I'm Joe.
And this is
has
us.
been us.